but St. Thomas doesn't really produce rock stars.
And so the next day they denied my appeal and said they were sorry. They put in a little note at the end and said, sorry, we know your situation's tough. So I had some help from my friends, but not a lot, and I ended up homeless. And I was exploited for sex for, roughly speaking, up until a few months ago. So I am a legacy student, and I came to the University of St. Thomas as a psychology major, Bachelor of Science. I was really excited getting started. I was really looking forward to doing research and getting my career going. I was very passionate about it, and St. Thomas was close to where I was at, so it worked out. The psychology department is currently and previously completely overrun by students. They do not have nearly enough professors, and they are repeatedly getting rid of the professors that they do have. So currently, you know how they promise on the St. Thomas website that you get individual attention? Yeah, their biggest major, they do group advising. So instead of getting an academic advisor for a one-on-one meeting, which is standard at almost every university I know of, you sit in a group and they tell you what to do, and students are left scrambling. So I really loved St. Thomas for a while. I was in student leadership. I had a great GPA. I had friends and mentors here. It was going really well. I had like a whole visualization in my head of how I'd get to graduate with some of the people I cared about, and that was what I was going for. But around the end of my time here, my last semester here, it started with FERPA. I suspected a FERPA violation, and I didn't want to formally accuse anyone and get anyone in trouble for a mistake. So what I did is I spoke to Amanda Villanueva about what I thought may have been a FERPA violation, and she was quite hostile toward me and quite defensive, and she would repeatedly say things that later proved to be false. For example, she would say like, well, I didn't break FERPA, you had a FERPA release on file. And then when I would show her that I didn't have a FERPA release on file, she would backtrack and say something else. This kept going on. I essentially had to get testimony from other administrators across campus to back her into a corner, and which is not what I wanted to do. All I wanted was that my privacy not be compromised. I wasn't even gonna formally report it, as long as she could promise me it wouldn't happen again. That sort of subsided after a bit. She apologized to me, but after that, the university started treating me and some people around me with a lot of aggression. It was terrifying. I was a student on campus who didn't have a lot of resources. This school was my saving throw, and I didn't really have anyone. I have autism, formally diagnosed, and in these meetings, I would get significantly distressed and sometimes slip into non-speaking states, because while I'm hyperlexic and able to communicate, sometimes under extreme duress, I lose the ability to do so. And I have trouble, or even if I can still speak with words, I lose the ability to understand and remember and process. So I bring advocates to my meetings. The school knew I was autistic, but they would, I guess, mock me. Amanda Villanueva told me to communicate like an adult, and then she went to my friends and told them how she couldn't stand that I had to use accommodations. I also have a congenital heart defect and some other underlying chronic conditions, which in my opinion were exacerbated by the stress. I started having heart episodes and other types of episodes related to my health on campus. During one of them, Angie Maxey removed my translator from the room. I was speaking in American Sign Language to the EMTs to ask for help. And I had a translator who was also my friend with me, and they asked her to stay, and Angie Maxey had her removed from the room and then submitted a conduct case against her. She took away my ability to speak to the doctors and ask for help. Eventually, I started getting pelted with conduct cases, and none of them really stuck because, like I said, I was in student leadership. I had a high GPA, I had friends and mentors, and I was basically the ideal college student, except I was disabled, which shouldn't be a factor, but I guess it was. And the conduct cases didn't stick, and I would typically have really good proof that nothing had happened when they would accuse me of things. It got a lot worse over the summer, and in September, I sort of saw the writing on the wall of what was about to happen. Every bit of it did end up happening. So I tried to commit suicide to escape the university and to protect my friends, who I was very fearful for due to their relation to me. And again, those fears materialized. My friends were targeted and ostracized and treated very badly. After I'd attempted suicide, they tried to make me out as aggressive, despite the fact that my psychiatrist unanimously disagreed. They told my friends that I was not suicidal, I was homicidal. Again, despite very real documentation to the contrary. It felt like every time I made a step forward and getting medication or getting therapy or getting more financial stability, they would do something to stop it. I got a campus job, they didn't pay me. I went to therapy, the therapist said I was too much for him and walked out in the middle of a session. It was an ongoing issue, and later, when I was, after I'd left the university, I met a couple other students who had also attempted suicide because of what the University of St. Thomas did to them, because of the lies and the manipulation and the malice. And then one day, they accused me of having weapons within the dorms. What had happened was I had a pocket knife for opening boxes. So I personally went to the police station and volunteered that it existed and handed it over to them myself. So when I was accused of having weapons in the dorms, and they heavily implied that I had violent intentions, despite having records on file that I have been, when this started and when the rumors started going around that I was aggressive or that I was homicidal, I found a established psychiatrist and basically had them evaluate me, and they turned in a report to the university saying that she's not aggressive, not homicidal, never was. So that was on file at the university. I didn't understand why they could accuse, or not even outright accuse, but imply this about me when they knew the truth. So I figured it would be a really easy fix. I was hoping it was a big misunderstanding. And I explained to them what was going on. They banned me from the dorms. And I appealed the case, and I sat down with Ben Wen, and I told him, look, I did not do these things you're implying. There are students with knives in the dorms all the time. We use them for opening boxes. You know this. I know other students who've been reprimanded for maybe being careless with their knives, but nobody's ever been banned from the dorms. This feels targeted. And they would laugh and say, your brain's playing tricks on you, sweetheart. And I said, I'm not accusing you. It's just, this is really odd. Please believe me. I've worked so hard at this university, and at this point, I have lost just about every friend and mentor I have here. And please don't do this to me, because I will end up homeless. And I'm sick, and I'm trying to get better, but if I am homeless, there's a chance I could die. And Ben Wen smiled and nodded, and he went, we'll take that into account. And so the next day, they denied my appeal and said they were sorry. They put in a little note at the end and said, sorry, we know your situation's tough. So I had some help from my friends, but not a lot, and I ended up homeless. And I was exploited for sex for, roughly speaking, up until a few months ago. The first time I was raped under a painting of the Blessed Mother. And I didn't have a way to defend myself. I didn't have a recourse. I was completely at the mercy of these people. My health started getting worse, just probably due to the stress. And I didn't have anything. Time went on, and I was homeless on and off. I had an apartment at one point, lost it, so forth. I started getting students on my doorstep. Quite literally, I had one young man turn up in the middle of the night on my doorstep, and sometimes they'd be in tears, or sometimes they'd be shaking, or just kind of catatonic. And they all would say, I don't know who to go to anymore, but I'm a student at UST and I need help. And the stories they would tell me, stories of systematic discrimination, of rape and cover-ups and lies and reputations destroyed. It was sickening, and I felt completely powerless to do anything about it. So what I would do was I would use what I had from the people who were raping me, the money, and I would get food for some of these students. And I would let them crash on my couch at times. Well, I had an apartment anyway. And then later, as the years went on, I watched more things start happening. I saw the fallout, and it happened similar to what happened to me, started happening to more of my friends. Just one after another. And meanwhile, more and more professors were shuffled away and fired and slandered and abused. And nobody was willing to stop it or to say anything. So while I was at the University of St. Thomas, I was in their counseling program. I was committed to personal growth and dealing with some of my mental health. So I did seek counseling from their counseling center, and I found it incredibly lacking. The counselor did not have a basic undergraduate understanding of depression. I, as a freshman psychology student, had to explain to him how depression works and what it is. He did not understand the differences between things like anorexia and bulimia, which are very important. He also didn't believe in them. He told me that if I prayed more, I wouldn't be depressed. And he told me that if I were to go outside, I wouldn't be depressed. And when I told him, well, I take walks every day, and I'm very committed to not being depressed, he told me, well, clearly you're not doing it enough, because I'm sure this would work. He also at one point received a report just from some concerned friends of mine that I had a severe eating disorder. He refused to treat me for it because he said that it wasn't real, and he was an expert, so he would know. My eating disorder got a lot worse. There were a couple of times where complications from it put me in the emergency room, and I wasn't able to get treatment for it at all until I left the university entirely. He would also say things to me in our sessions that were inappropriate at best. I mentioned being beat up and physically assaulted quite a few times. And he asked me where my scars were, because if it really happened, I would have scars. And I told him, well, yeah, I do have some, but they're not really your business. I don't need to prove that to you, and I'm not going to strip in a counseling session to prove it. And at another point, he got up in the middle of a session and walked out and said he couldn't handle it anymore, and he was going to go pray. I also told him something quite personal about my identity and my experiences. It was very relevant to the therapy. He reacted really strongly, really negatively. I believe he called me an abomination, and told me to, quote, never fight for my rights because something about evil. I would complain about this. I did complain about this quite a lot. It just didn't seem to matter. They didn't offer me any other resources. I reached out to other counselors on campus, and they didn't want to take my case. There was a point where Amanda Villanueva was accusing me of not trying to get better, and she said that I was taxing university resources. She said I was lucky to be here, and any other university would have kicked me out already. And I told her, I've reached out to all of your counselors. I am trying so hard. I'm taking my medication. The problems I'm having are because of y'all in the first place. If you give me another resource, I will take it. And she didn't. She just kind of doubled down on, you're lucky to be here at all. So what ended up happening is that I was groomed on websites, groomed for sex. These websites would offer memberships to anyone with an EDU email address. And I didn't take up that offer, but it was there. That's how the trafficking started. I didn't want to. I never wanted to. I felt like I was in this cage and waiting for it to open at any second. It was a little bit embarrassing, is because I've taught women self-defense and awareness for most of my life. So while they were grooming me and later raping me, I absolutely knew what was going on and what they were trying to do, but I didn't have a choice. I was kind of just sitting there talking to someone who I knew was going to rape me and waiting for it to happen. And I didn't feel like there was anyone I could tell or any way I could get help. There were maybe one or two people on campus that I considered telling and asking for help, but after I witnessed how the university would retaliate against people who dared to advocate for my rights, I didn't want to risk getting them in trouble by having them have to say she's being sex trafficked. I am an autistic student. I've been formally diagnosed with autism, and I got second, third, and fourth opinions because it's a little bit staggering to find that out when you're, 18? I fall under an umbrella of autistic people classified as hyperlexic, which means I'm generally pretty good at using language, but it is not an accurate reflection of my overall functioning. According to my doctors, my social development is about that of an 11-year-old. I'm able to understand logic and consequences and rules and boundaries, but in terms of social development, I never made it to the 12th year milestone, and I'm still stuck at about 11 years old. This is something that would absolutely carry over to meetings with the administration, to classes, and all of that kind of thing. So I have accommodations on file, and I had the fact that I had autism in the first place on file because I didn't want to risk potentially sending an 11-year-old, a person who is socially 11 years old, into very complex situations. And I followed these accommodations. I had a translator for when I used sign language. I had your standard autism accommodations, but the amount of judgment and hostility that I was continually met with was alarming, to say the least. Everything from being told to communicate like an adult, or to stop acting like this, to stop getting so agitated, that sort of thing. I felt bullied. and patronized, where I would speak with them in meetings alone when I didn't feel like I needed an advocate that day for whatever reason, which is, it's up to me to decide my own functioning on a day, but sometimes I wouldn't feel like I needed one, so I would go without one. And they would say, "Oh my goodness, good job, you're acting like a grown-up." And I am a grown-up. I'm a disabled grown-up, but I'm an adult. I'm an autistic adult, and the rights to my accommodations are not something that should be mocked or patronized, or I was bullied for them. Sometimes there was a point where I would hear that Amanda had told other students, allegedly, that she didn't think my autism was that bad, which is not how autism works, and that I needed to get over it and grow up. Had really hoped I was alone in this, but it quickly became horrifyingly evident that that was not accurate. The amount of autistic students or students who are otherwise disabled that have approached me begging me for help because they feel like they've been targeted because of their autism is astounding. Students made to attend meetings alone, accommodations ignored, bullying and harassment, nasty comments about how we won't succeed. Sometimes it's something as subtle as a professor walking up to an autistic student and saying, "Oh my goodness, you're so grown up now," which I have witnessed personally. These are grown men and women. And yes, we struggle. Yes, we need extra support and advocates. And yeah, I guess socially, sure, I am 11 years old. But I can succeed too. And not only did they prevent my success, but they actively bullied me when I tried to go after it. The way they spoke to my fellow autistic students, telling them that their brain was playing tricks on them and that they surely couldn't understand, there was a continuous undertone of, "You don't get it because your brain is messed up and mine isn't." It was disgusting. I know I was told my brain was playing tricks on me. My friends were told they couldn't possibly understand situations. And this was usually when they were whistleblowing, when they noticed something was off. In my case, in the many other Title IX cases there are, the discrimination cases, the faculty abuse cases, the autistic students were the ones approaching the administration, and the administration would shut them up every time with something about how, like, there's more to this story, and, you couldn't understand. It was really bad. I remember at one point they had an assembly on campus to support autistic students, and they didn't have any autistic students speaking at the assembly or any people with autism at all. It was laughable, and a friend of mine is autistic, and she said, "This isn't going to fly, I'm going to call them out for this." So she called them out, and with, I think, a couple days to spare, maybe less, they invited her to be the keynote speaker. So you're expecting me to believe that they did this accommodation event for autistic people, and they had it all planned out, and they couldn't find a keynote speaker till the last second? It was deplorable. During that specific assembly, there were things said that were deeply ableist about how, essentially, on this campus, they promote segregation of autistic students from neurotypical students, instead of understanding that any of us can succeed in any of the programs with the right accommodations. They like to keep us separate from the others. And I don't like it, and it's not okay. We're not children, and we're not less than. Treating us as anything less than human beings who embody the image of God is an affront to our humanity and to our dignity. And I fully believe the university has done that. What it comes down to is they are saving lives to a few good professors who are completely burnt out. And these people are heroes. But there's so many other professors and administrators and people who know what's going on, and they choose to turn away. Cowardice is a privilege of the powerful. They get to turn away because they have resources and they have their jobs and insurance. But we're the ones who are left homeless, and we're the ones who are left, best case scenario, with a degree that took us far too long to get without ample support. You can pretend that you don't know, and you can pretend that you're listening to me, and you can do all of these things you want to do, but the fact is, the second people start comparing stories, and the second we start looking at the evidence and the documentation and the recordings and your tax records, the truth becomes apparent. So you can lie all you want, but the truth will catch up to you. And I really hope it does, for the sake of my life and the sake of every single life this place is ruined. For every student out there that's watching this and is considering coming forward and maybe has a story, and if they're afraid, I would like to encourage you to stand up to your bullies, because they only have power until people stand up to them. And once we do that, they can't do anything.